The sun was a soft, golden peach sinking low behind the trees, and the sky, once bursting with the laughter of day, now whispered in hues of lavender and rose. The wind tiptoed through the grass, brushing the earth with cool fingers. He walked softly. He spoke rarely. He listened more than and his eyes, old and brown and wise, carried a kindness like the evening itself. Somewhere, a bird sang a final lullaby, and far away, a river sighed, as if it, too, was tired. In the middle of this quiet hush, in the wide grasslands, where the earth rolled like the swell of old ocean waves, walked a very gentle elephant named Banto. Banto was large. Of course, his feet left deep prints in the soft soil, but he'd never liked to be loud. The day had been long. He had helped a baby zebra out of a muddy pond by curling his trunk gently under its belly. He had guided a lost tortoise back to his burrow with slow, careful steps, the kind of breath that said, "I am tired, but not broken. I am worn, but not weary of love." He had even stood beneath a fruit tree for hours, so that the birds could pluck figs from its branches, hopping along his broad back like he was part of the forest. The wind slowed, as if in respect. The leaves trembled but did not fall. Even the crickets paused their song. Now, the weight of it, all the steps, the kindness, the moments pressed gently on him, like a blanket made of clouds. He reached a quiet grove where the grass turned silver in the light of the setting sun. And there, beneath an ancient baobab tree, he stopped. His ears flopped softly against the ground. His eyelids, heavy as dusk, began to close. Banto exhaled. It was a long, low breath. "My grandmother says you carried her across the stream last spring, and she's never forgotten it." He did not remember the exact moment, but the warmth it brought to his heart was enough. He bent his knees slowly and lay down, folding himself into the earth like a mountain returning to sleep. Then a whisper. Tiny footsteps. Something was approaching. Banto did not stir. His ears flicked gently, but he stayed still, resting. "You are warm, and the wind is cold tonight." A mouse appeared beside his trunk. "You've always been a friend to the sky." She was a brave little creature with gray fur and bright eyes, and she carried a tiny petal in her mouth. "Banto," she said gently. He opened one eye, not startled, not annoyed, just curious. "I brought you a flower," she said, "for your kindness today. You did not drink first. You let him. That was noble." Banto blinked slowly, as if the memory was a dream he'd once had. Not the kind that comes from rest, but the kind that grows from knowing your life has touched others. The mouse placed the petal gently on his trunk. "Rest well," she whispered, and she vanished into the grass. Soon after, a small owl glided down from the tree. Its wings were silent as shadow, and its voice was soft as moonlight, just to give back in their own small, quiet ways. He looked like a hill made of stardust, still and strong and glowing from within. A baby warthog curled against his side. Even the fireflies floated above him, blinking slowly, painting the night with tiny dots of gold. The grasses leaned toward him, as if to kiss his weary shoulders. "Banto," said the owl, "do you mind if I perch here for a while?" Banto did not answer with words. He shifted his massive back ever so slightly, just enough to offer a better perch. In dreams, he heard the laughter of calves and the hush of rivers. In dreams, he saw the world, not as it was, but as it could be, tender, listening, alive. "Thank you," the owl murmured. The stars blinked on above them like tiny candles, lit one by one. Then came the fox, her tail tipped with silver, her eyes sharp and kind. "I saw you give your water to the wildebeest. Heard this morning," she said, settling beside his great front foot. "A soft thank you to the elephant who gave more than his strength." Banto said nothing. Not because he was proud, but because kindness needs no trumpet. The fox lay down beside him and fell asleep. One by one, the creatures of the grassland arrived. A porcupine rolled herself into the curve of his leg. Banto, though tired, felt a warmth spread through his heart. He remembered the feeling of the zebra's tiny heartbeat when he lifted it to safety. He remembered the tortoise's eyes, looking up in trust. He remembered the birds hopping across his back, chirping thank yous like scattered pearls. And now, this, all around him. Those he had helped simply came. Not to ask for more. Not to take. Just to be near. The moon rose slowly, its light catching on the gentle ridges of Bonto's back. At last, his eyes closed. The wind carried a lullaby from the trees. The night animals hummed softly in their sleep. And Bonto, the gentle elephant, sank fully into his tired evening knot. Lonely, not forgotten, but held by the living memory of every kindness he had ever given. In dreams, he walked beneath golden clouds. The grove remained quiet through the night, a sacred hush. And in the morning, when the first light touched the sky, Bonto rose slowly, a little less tired, a little more whole. The first breath of dawn stretched across the sky like a gentle hand brushing the brow of the earth. Pale gold dripped from the edge of clouds, and a hush still clung to the grove where Bonto slept except for the quiet sounds of small dreams ending in new footsteps beginning. Bonto stirred. His eyes fluttered open like old shutters welcoming light. For a moment, he did not rise. He simply listened. He listened to the faint chirp of crickets wrapping up their night songs. He listened to the fox's breathing, soft and slow, beside his foot. He listened to the wind, nudging the leaves as if to say, "Wake, wake, the world needs you again." But he did not move. Not yet, because something beautiful was happening. They did not hurry. They did not scatter. They stayed, like stars lingering even after the sun rises. The creatures who had gathered around him the night before were waking one by one. The little mouse crept forward again, nibbling a berry she had brought. "I saved you the red one," she said shyly. "They're the sweetest." Bonto bent his trunk and accepted it, letting it rest on his tongue like a gift. Not for hunger, for love. The fox stood and stretched, her silver tail catching the dawn. "We dreamed of you," she said. "Of how the forest calls you brother, and the rivers know your name." Bonto rumbled low in his throat, a sound, not of pride, but of peace. And just then, from the edge of the grove, came the sound of tiny feet, dozens of them padding softly. The smallest among them, barely the size of a mango, scrambled up to Bonto's side. A family of monkeys, bright and playful, entered the clearing. "We brought you songs," the youngest said. "The kind you used to hum when you thought no one was listening." Bonto raised his eyes. The monkeys began to sing a simple tune, made of clicks and soft whistles, but it held in it something ancient. It echoed of warm days and deeper meanings, of laughter under trees and rest in safe places. He had sung it once, many seasons ago, when he was much younger, when the world still felt like something to chase. Now, the world came to him not to be conquered, but to be shared. And as the melody danced around the grove, other animals appeared. A herd of antelope watched from a distance, ears twitching respectfully. 2 cranes flew overhead, casting long shadows across the grass. Even the tortoise he had guided days ago came slowly toward him, carrying on his shell a small bloom of morning glory. "You are the stillness that others gather around," the tortoise said, placing the flower at Bonto's feet. Bonto bowed his head, gently. He knew, in his old and listening heart, that the morning did not ask him to do anything today. It did not want his strength. It did not want his wisdom. It only wanted his presence. He stood, finally slowly, with the grace of something vast and rooted. The creatures stepped back, not out of fear, but reverence. The ground seemed to hum beneath his feet. It gathers around them, holds them, and sings them gently back into strength. He turned toward the rising sun, and in that moment, he didn't feel tired. He felt full of the night's quiet gratitude, full of the way the grove had become a sanctuary, a circle of returning love, full of the truth that even giants need to rest. And when they do, the world does not forget. Bonto began to walk, not quickly, not toward anything in particular. He simply moved, carrying the song in his bones, the berry's sweetness on his tongue. and the memory of being held not by arms, but by presence. Behind him, the grove remained, not empty, not silent. It had changed. There, in the place where a tired elephant had once laid down to rest, kindness had made a home, a cradle in the grass, a memory in the soil, a story in the sky, and somewhere, just beyond the morning light, the animals knew Bonto was walking again, and the earth, grateful for his steps, bloomed gently beneath his feet. The sun had risen higher now, not fierce, but golden soft, as a grandmother's shawl laid across the land. The wind, still hushed from the night's grace, followed Bonto as he walked slow, steady, sacred. His footsteps did not press into the earth now. They melted into it, as if the ground had softened for him, as if it remembered the rhythm of his walk, the weight of his kindness. He walked toward a place he hadn't visited in many seasons, a hill, not high, not famous, just a quiet, wind-kissed slope, where the grass grew tall and the sky opened wide. It was once a place of joy, of play, of trumpeting calves and running feet and dust that shimmered in the air like laughter. It was where Bonto had grown up. The memories rose as he walked. There, beneath the crooked tree, he had first learned to trumpet not in warning, but in wonder. There, by the cluster of rocks, he had met his first friend, a rhino who used to race him to the top of the hill, always losing but never caring. There, in the shade, his mother had once rested her trunk across his back, humming low melodies into his ears. When storms gathered, he hadn't returned here in a long while, not because he had forgotten, but because memory, too, can be heavy when you carry it alone. Now, older, slower, wiser, Bonto climbed the hill once more. Each step felt like turning a page. He reached the top and stood beneath the crooked tree. The wind greeted him like an old song. He closed his eyes. The hill remembered. It remembered the weight of baby feet. It remembered the long line of ancestors who had walked it before him. It remembered the way his mother used to sing to the clouds. And so it began to sing too, not with music, with presence. The grass rustled like voices. The leaves swayed like memories. And Bonto felt something stir in him. This time, it was not because he was tired. It was because he wanted to listen. And as he lay there, his great frame curved beneath the old tree, the wind carried voices to him, not loud, not ghostly, just echoes. The rhino's laugh, his mother's lullaby, the thunder of young hooves in play. And then, a new voice. A real one. "Are you the elephant who helped the zebra?" a small voice asked. "He said you carried peace in your steps." Bonto opened one eye. A young giraffe stood at the edge of the hill, her eyes wide, her legs thin and wobbling, her heart open. "Yes," Bonto replied, his voice low as thunder wrapped in velvet. "My father told me you were a legend," she said shyly. Bonto didn't answer that. He simply nodded. The young giraffe came closer. A group of parakeets, a mother cheetah with 2 cubs, even a beetle, rolling its tiny ball, paused to join the quiet. "May I sit with you?" she asked. Bonto shifted slightly, making space, and so she sat. Others followed. A meerkat family. No one spoke much. They simply gathered, not to worship, not to ask, just to be near. Because sometimes, being near someone who remembers how to be gentle is the most healing thing of all. Hours passed. The sun drifted westward, and still, Bonto sat, still, strong. Listening at one point, the young giraffe leaned against his shoulder and whispered through the trees, as if to say, "The circle continues." "You're not like the other elders," she said. Bonto turned slightly. "Why not? You don't tell us what to do." Bonto smiled, faintly. "I only offer space," he said. "Sometimes, space is what wisdom looks like." And the giraffe thought about that for a long time. As the day softened into ambling gold once again, the wind picked up slightly. Bonto stood. The creatures looked up. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. His leaving was not an end. It was a ripple. As he walked down the hill, the sun trailing behind him like an old friend, the young giraffe whispered to the wind, "Someday, I want to carry peace in my steps, too." And the hill, ancient and listening, whispered back, "You already are." The sun was low now, draping the forest in threads of bronze and softening the edges of the world. Shadows grew long, and the warm light touched the tips of the grass as though it, too, were growing tired in a good way. The way rivers grow tired after a long journey to the sea. Birds did not sing loudly here. They cooed quietly. The air was cooler, wiser. Bonto entered the oldest part of the forest. The trees here were thick with memory. Their trunks were scarred by time, their branches laced with moss like delicate veins. Back then, he thought that power was something you showed with your feet, with your voice, with your size. He remembered this place. It was the forest where he had once come to learn how to listen. He had been a younger elephant, then strong, fast, restless. But here, in this quiet grove, he had met someone who changed him. An owl, old, nearly silent, eyes like twin lanterns in the dark. He had said to Bonto once, "You think the forest respects your strength, but what it truly respects is your silence." That lesson had never left him. And now, returning in his old age, Bonto felt the forest lean toward him as if, too, remembered that young elephant who once sat beneath the trees, learning to be still. No, that owl had returned to the stars. Long ago, a gentle wind stirred the leaves, a rustle, then a hush. Small, curious, wide-eyed and silent-footed, and from the branches above, a shape drifted downward. It was not the same owl. This was a younger one. He perched on a low branch and stared at Bonto with quiet reverence. "Are you the one who sat here long ago?" he asked. "He said you carried stillness, like a lamp in the dark." Bonto nodded. "My father told stories of you," the owl whispered. The youngest, a fawn with trembling legs, stepped closest. "I tried to," Bonto replied, his voice softer than the wind. The owl leaned closer. "Can I sit with you, the way you once sat with him?" Bonto lowered himself slowly to the earth, the way a mountain bows to the stars. The owl fluttered down beside him. The forest grew even quieter. For a long while, they said nothing. The forest listened, and then a small family of deer appeared. They moved like mist, quiet and glowing in the last of the day's light. "Why is it so quiet here?" she asked. Bonto turned his great head toward her. "Because quiet things grow deep roots." She blinked, unsure if she understood. But she sat beside him anyway. Others joined one by one. A badger, a pair of wild dogs, a young leopard, cautious but curious, even a porcupine, dragging a leaf like a blanket. No one shouted. No one made noise. They simply gathered, as if something sacred was happening, and it was not a speech, not a story, not a lesson, but a moment, a single, slow-blooming moment of presence. The kind of moment that does not come when you chase it, only when you arrive completely. Bonto closed his eyes. He didn't need to teach. He was the teaching, his breathing, the rhythm, his silence, the message, his stillness, the gift. And in that moment, beneath those ancient trees, something shifted. Not loudly, but deeply. The young owl leaned close again. "Will you come here again tomorrow?" Bonto opened his eyes. "No. My path keeps moving." "But where are you going?" "Nowhere," Bonto said. "And everywhere." The owl looked puzzled. Bonto continued. "I do not travel to arrive. I travel to bless." As the moon rose above the trees, spilling silver over the mossy trunks and tired roots, the animals grew still. They watched Bonto rise again, his body large but somehow even lighter than before. He turned to go, but before he vanished into the darkening trees, he looked back at them, and in the hush of the forest, his eyes said everything. "Carry the quiet with you." And then he walked on, not toward a destination, but toward continuance. like a lullaby that never ends. The moon was a pearl now, floating high, veiled in silver mist. The forest behind Bonto grew quiet with dreams. Before him stretched a winding trail, narrow, rising, touched by cold. He was heading to the mountains, not for any grand reason, not to seek, not to hide, just to go. Because sometimes the soul needs to rise just to remember how small everything is and how beautiful. He was not walking over the mountain. The path was steep, blanketed with dry leaves and the soft scent of pine. His feet, though large, moved with reverence. He was walking with it, for even the earth deserves gentleness. His ears, once weary, now caught the high, Selenze, kind-only mountains. Tiny fires blinked in distant villages. Rivers curled like threads of moonlight. And far, far away, he could still see the faint line of the forest where the owl and the fawn had once sat beside him. Each breath steamed from his trunk like slow fog. At the edge of a cliff, he paused. Below him, the valley shimmered blue and endless, like a dream halfway remembered. He closed his eyes, and in that moment, something changed. The wind rose not loud, but deep-handed, carried a voice, not one he recognized, not from memory. This voice came from the mountain itself. Bonto, it whispered, not in words, but in stone and silence. Do you know what you are? He listened, and the mountain continued. You are not the teacher. You are the echo, not the one who speaks, but the shape silence takes when it's remembered. A stillness bloomed in his chest. All this time, he had walked, thinking he had something to offer, a lesson, a peace, a moment of calm. But maybe it was simpler. Maybe his tiredness was not weakness. Maybe it was a gift, the kind only an old elephant can carry without breaking. Not following him, exactly, but following something he'd left behind. Below the cliff, he noticed movement. A small group of animals were climb young ones. A memory, a mood, a way of being. Among them was the young giraffe. She was taller now, steadier. She saw him from the ledge and raised her voice, not loudly, but enough to carry. We're not here to ask anything, she said. We just wanted to walk near where you walked. Bonto smiled. He didn't move toward them. He didn't need to. Some journeys are not made with footsteps, but with presence left behind, like footprints in light. So he lay down again, high on the cliff, wrapped in sky. His great body curled slightly, trunk resting across his tusk. And there, beneath the quiet stars, with the wind brushing gently over his ears, Bonto finally rested. Not from weariness, but from fullness. The kind of rest that comes not at the end of a story, but at the crest of one, because somewhere below, others had started walking. And the mountain watched, and the stars listened, and the silence said. He came, he walked, he softened the world. Morning crept into the mountains, with pale gold fingers, brushing the snow-tipped peaks, and gently pressing back the stars. The valley below still dreamed, but up on the ledge where Bonto had rested, the wind stood still, as if bowing. The gentle elephant had not moved. His great form lay cradled by rock and sky, silent, but his stillness was not absent. It was presence, multiplied, and just below, the young giraffe stood, not weeping, not calling, only watching. Something old, something vast, something she could not name, but carried now like a seed in her chest. She had climbed through the night, guided not by a path, but by a feeling. She stepped closer. The others had stopped below, respectful. But she had to see. There he was, Bonto, peaceful. So peaceful, it hurt. She didn't speak. Words would crumble here. Instead, she lay beside him, not in sorrow, but in awe, the way children lie beside rivers, not needing to understand them to feel their beauty. After some time, the wind shifted, and with it came a single, feather-white, soft and slow. It drifted down from the sky, spiraling between them. The giraffe caught it against her neck. She closed her eyes, and in the hush that followed, she heard it, not a voice, Not exactly, but a knowing. The quiet isn't something you carry behind you, it whispered. It is what grows ahead of you where your steps have not yet touched. She stood tall now, not loudly, not suddenly, but like dawn melting frost. Taller than before, not just in body, but in spirit. Something had changed. She looked one last time at Banto, and instead of goodbye, she bowed, a deep bow from the neck, from the heart, from somewhere inside her bones. Then she turned and walked, not away, but onward. Each step deliberate, each breath thoughtful, each silence held like a song. Down the mountain, through the forest, across rivers, into new lands. Animals watched her pass, not because she was grand but because she was still. They said, "There's something in her walk." She listens. She sees without judging. She doesn't rush. And when young ones ask her who taught her that way of being, she never told the full story. She only said, "Once, I walked beside someone who knew how to rest without falling." And that was enough, because Banto lived now in her rhythm, in her pause before speaking, in her gentleness toward the weak, in the way she waited for the wind to finish its thought before she continued her own. She did not try to be him. She only remembered how it felt to be near him. And that was his legacy. Not a statue, not a song, not even a name etched in bark, but a feeling passed from step to step, like water from trunk to trunk. The feeling that even in a world that hurries, there is power in the patient heart. And so, the gentle elephant's story continued, in her steps, in her silences, in the echo of kindness that never fades. The sky had begun to change. Gray clouds moved in not with anger, but with the hush of something sacred approaching. The first drops of rain fell softly, kissing the leaves, tapping the ground like ancient fingers, reminding the earth of its pulse. The young giraffe, now called Sima by those who walked with her, tilted her head to the sky and did not run. She welcomed the rain. It reminded her of Banto's step, slow, certain, steady. Behind her, others gathered. The deer, the owl, the porcupine, even a pair of cheetah cubs who had long since stopped chasing shadows and now followed light instead. They had walked for days, not knowing why, only that something inside them wanted to. Sima had not spoken much. She didn't lead with instructions. She led with listening. The rain had deepened, drumming gently on the canopy above. And now, in the clearing where a circle of smooth stones curved like an ancient memory, she stopped. She stepped into the center of the stone circle and lay down, stretching her long legs beside her like a folded bridge. The others hesitated. Then, slowly, one by one, they followed. Not because they were told, because they felt it. Soon, the circle was full wet fur, damp feathers, tangled tails, and quiet breath. They didn't huddle for shelter. They huddled for closeness. And in that circle, something was born, not a movement, not a lesson, a feeling, like the earth was breathing again, and they were part of its lungs. Then Sima did something that surprised even her. She closed her eyes and began to hum. It was a low hum, rough at first, unsure, but it found its shape. It came not from her throat, but from her chest, her ribs, her heart. It was not Banto's hum. It was her own. And still, the others joined, not to copy, but to remember something ancient inside themselves. Voices rose not as songbirds do in performance, but as the river does in belonging. The rain did not silence them. It accompanied them. Together, they became something more than a group. They became a memory being made. And above them, high on the mountain cliffs, the wind passed over the ledge where Banto had once rested and carried the hum down into the valley. The trees felt it. The rivers echoed it. Even the stones, old and silent, seemed to lean inward. Because this is how stories continue. Not in books, not in monuments, but in gatherings like these, in circles beneath rain, in songs that begin without knowing, in lives shaped gently by those who walked before. And Sima, eyes still closed, whispered one word into the humming hush. "Thank you." And somewhere far off, perhaps in the wind, perhaps in her bones, she heard the reply. Among the animals gathered in the rain-soaked circle, near the back where the stones grew mossy and the trees leaned close, sat a small fox named Luma. He had joined them quietly, almost by accident, or so he thought. He hadn't come for a story. He hadn't come for a leader. He had simply followed a feeling that tugged at his chest like a loose thread. Luma had always been nervous, always listening for danger, always calculating escape. His paws were quick, his mind quicker. But here, under the gray sky and soft hum of Seema's circle, something inside him had begun to slow. At first, it had frightened him. Stillness can feel like exposure when you've lived your life in hiding. But now, as the rain slid down his fur and the humming faded into the warm hush of evening, Luma noticed something strange. He wasn't afraid. Not of the others, not of the quiet, not even of his own thoughts. It was as if the presence of the old elephant, though unseen, had wrapped him in something softer than safety. Belonging. Seema opened her eyes and met his gaze, not with command, but with recognition, as if to say, "Yes, you feel it too." Later that night, long after the circle had dissolved and the forest had returned to its rhythm, Luma stayed awake beneath a crooked tree. The stars had come back, scattered, sleepy, listening, and Luma did something he had never done before. He spoke aloud, to no one, to everyone, to the trees, to Bonto, to himself. "I think I carry something," he whispered. His voice was barely more than breath, but the stars leaned closer. "It's not big, it's not brave, but it's real." And for the first time, Luma didn't hide from what stirred inside him. He let it rise, a feeling of small footsteps that did not need to be loud to leave deep prints, of moving gently through the world, not unnoticed, but unharming. He curled his tail around himself and looked at the stars. "Maybe the quiet ones carry the strongest songs," he murmured. A breeze rustled the branches above him, like fingers through pages. Then a single leaf broke free, twirling down, and landed beside him. Luma stared at it. Not just a leaf, a sign. So in the morning, while the others still slept, he stood small, soft-footed, and sure. He didn't wake Seema. He didn't announce his going. He simply went, not away, forward, his own path, the quiet path. And as he disappeared into the mist-laced forest, the echo of Bonto's presence trailed behind him like a shadow of light. Because now, the story was not about one gentle elephant. It was about every soul he had touched, and the quiet revolution of kindness they carried into the world. Luma moved like a shadow, softened by light. The forest ahead was new, thick with ferns and the smell of wet bark. Morning clung to everything misty, unsure, beautiful. He wasn't searching for anything. He had simply listened to the hush inside him and let it become his map. As the hours passed, he heard the forest begin to speak, not in words, but in feelings. A rustle here, a stillness there, a kind of longing beneath the surface of things. It was just past a fallen log that he found the child. Not a fox, not a deer, a very small badger, sitting by a stone 3 times his size, trembling. The badger's fur was muddied, his paws raw from scratching at the earth. He didn't notice Luma at first. Luma didn't rush. He sat, curled his tail, and waited. When the badger finally turned and saw him, there was no fear, just swollen eyes and a soft, helpless whisper. "It won't move." He pointed to the stone. Luma tilted his head. "What's beneath it?" he asked. The badger looked down. "A ribbon. It belonged to my mother. The wind blew it under while I was napping." Luma walked to the stone. It was large, but not immovable. Still, it had settled deep. Mud had claimed its base. The kind of obstacle that doesn't just need strength, it needs care. He didn't speak. He simply began. First, he used a fallen stick to push away the wet leaves. Then he placed his paws on the side and lent not to force, but to feel. And the badger watched how Luma breathed, how he didn't panic, how his silence was Not the absence of action, but the presence of attention. After some time, Luma paused. Not out of exhaustion, out of wisdom. He turned to the badger. Will you help me dig around it? Not to lift it, just to understand it. The badger blinked, then nodded. Together, they dug. Slowly, carefully, until the stone no longer felt like a wall, but a part of the ground itself. A part they could reach. When the ribbon finally slid free, dirty but whole, the badger held it close. I thought I had lost it forever, he whispered. Luma sat beside him. He didn't say it's okay. He didn't say it's just a ribbon. He said, some things are worth sitting beside. The badger didn't answer. He just leaned head against Luma's side. And for a while, the forest felt warmer. The wind circled them, carrying the scent of pine and memory. Somewhere far off, a bird called a soft echo, and Luma, still small, still quiet, realized something he had not set out to teach. He had not planned to comfort. He had only followed the gentle inside him. And that had been enough, more than enough. That night, under a canopy of trembling stars, the badger curled beside Luma. Both of them silent, both of them full, and somewhere in the hush between their breathing, the forest whispered, this is how the heavy things become light. Not by lifting them alone, but by being seen while they're still in the earth. The next morning, the forest exhaled light. Mist lifted, ferns uncurled, and high in the sky, a bird sang a note so still it felt like the pause before a story continues. Luma and a little badger, now walking side by side, had not spoken since dawn. They didn't need to. Their silence was no longer empty. It was woven with trust, with knowing, with something older than both of them. As they moved, the path behind them seemed to shimmer not from magic, but from meaning. Because they weren't just walking, they were leaving a rhythm behind. And far off, in another part of the forest, Seema felt it. She had paused beside a stream, its water mirror-like, and looked up suddenly hard, stirring, ears alert. Something had shifted. Not in fear. In continuation, she smiled. The circle had widened. The echo had found another voice. That evening, Seema gathered the animals again, not for a meeting, not for a lesson, but for remembering. They sat beneath a willow, its long fingers brushing the earth like a grandmother's hands. No one spoke for a while, until the owl asked quietly, do you think he knew? Seema didn't ask who. She knew. They all did. Banto. She turned her gaze upward, to the silver edge of the moon. I think he knew. Without knowing. Because the best kind of knowing is the kind that doesn't try. The owl blinked slowly. The porcupine sniffed the air and said, it smells like a story out there. They all smiled, and in the middle of the group, unnoticed at first, sat a very old turtle, wrinkled, weathered, watching. He cleared his throat, softly. Everyone turned. May I tell you something? He asked. They nodded. He closed his eyes and began. Once, many years ago, I passed through a grove where a great elephant stood beside a sleeping bird. He said nothing, but I rested near him, and when I woke, the ache I carried was quieter. I never told him thank you. I thought I'd forgotten him. Until tonight, a hush wrapped around them, the kind that doesn't fall from above, but rises from below. A hush of recognition. Seema leaned forward. Then you've already walked part of this path. The turtle smiled. Maybe we all have, in ways we never named. Above them, a breeze swept through the willow. Leaves danced, and for a heartbeat, they all felt it. A presence not gone, not distant, just spread wider than before, like a river that keeps flowing long after it's left the mountain. And as the stars climbed into the sky one by one, Seema spoke the final words of the night. To walk with peace. He was never trying to teach us anything. He just showed us what it feels like. They nodded, and the quiet held them gently, like the memory of a lullaby. Epilogue. Some say that, in certain parts of the forest, if you walk slowly enough and listen not with your ears, but with your bones, you can still feel the rhythm of a great elephant's footsteps, pressed into the earth like a song too deep to fade. Not a story that ends, but one that walks beside you forever. Long after the last gathering beneath the willow, long after Luma and the little badger had wandered on, long after the songs grew quieter and the forest returned to its own hum, there remained a place that wasn't marked on any path, a clearing that changed shape with the seasons but never lost its soul. The animals called it different things: the quiet bend, the listening ground, the elephant's rest. But none of those names really mattered, because those who found it didn't find it with their eyes. They found it with their stillness. It wasn't where Bonto had died. It wasn't where he had been buried. It was where he had once paused, many years before, beside a pool of still water, just long enough for the grass to remember him. And though the wind had long since erased his footprints, the earth held the memory. You could feel it in the way the leaves tilted inward, the way the trees leaned slightly toward one another, the way the silence didn't press on you but welcomed you. One morning, a young bird landed there, not knowing why. Her feathers were speckled, and her wings still unsure. She'd been flying for days, chasing something unnamed. The moment she entered the clearing, she felt a hush move through her. Not fear, a hush like hands closing around a sleeping heart, a hush like a breath you didn't know you needed. She sat up, and without thinking, she began to hum. Not because someone had taught her, because something within her remembered. And from that day on, whenever the soul grew tired of running, or too heavy with ache, or simply ready to listen, they found their way there. Not for advice, not for answers, but for the company of silence. Because sometimes the greatest gift is not a voice to follow, but the space to feel your own return. Asterisk. Asterisk. In the softest corner of the forest, a story rests, not ended, just waiting to be remembered by the next quiet one who stops long enough to listen. Asterisk. In the center of the clearing, where the sky opens widest, there stood an old tree. It didn't bear fruit. Its branches didn't reach the tallest, but it listened better than any other tree in the forest. The others called it the echo tree, because when you sat beneath it and whispered something from your heart, you didn't get an answer. You got a memory, not yours, someone else's, always gentle, always quiet, as if the tree had been collecting stories dropped like feathers from all who passed by. One evening, just as the sun poured honey-colored light across the clearing, a young squirrel arrived. Her name was Maple, and she was not brave. She had spent most of her young life doubting her worth. Too small, too unsure. She had heard whispers of the echo tree, and though she didn't believe in such things, she had come anyway because sometimes the ache inside you needs to move, even if you don't know where. She sat at the base of the tree. The bark was rough but warm. The roots cradled her like an old friend, and without meaning to, she whispered, "I don't know what I'm meant to become." For a while, nothing, only wind, only quiet. And then softly, gently, a picture bloomed inside her mind. Not her memory. A scene. A massive elephant, gray and tired, laying down beside a river. He wasn't speaking, he wasn't teaching, he was simply resting. A tiny mouse, curled up in the crook of his leg, and beside him, breathing in sync, 2 lives, 1 rhythm. Maple blinked. She didn't understand the story with her mind, but her heart recognized something. That becoming didn't always look like growing bigger. Sometimes it meant slowing down, joining, trusting that your softness has weight. She touched the tree trunk gently. "Thank you," and far off, in a breeze that didn't stir the leaves, but rustled her chest, she heard it. "Walk gently. That is enough." She stood, not taller, but truer, and she walked back into the forest not with answers, but with a belonging that needed no proof. In time, many came. A hawk who had lost his purpose, a mole who had lost his sight, a bear cub who had lost his mother. Each sat by the echo tree. Each left with a whisper that changed their shape. Not loudly, not quickly, but permanently. Because some stories don't they invite, they warm, they just like Bonto once did. And the tree kept listening. And the memories kept arriving, until the clearing itself became a kind of living memory, not of an elephant alone, but of what he made others feel. I am not young. I do not walk. I do not speak in sound. But I remember, not because I was taught to, but because I was there, beneath it all, while time breathed in and out through fur and feather, through footstep and sigh. I remember the day the elephant came. Not when he was old, but when he was quiet. He didn't say much. He sat beneath me. Before I was even tall enough to offer shade, he placed his massive head near my trunk and closed his eyes. And though I had no voice to answer, I listened, because listening is something even a seed knows how to do. He visited often in those days, not to change the world, but to rest within it. Each time he came, he left something behind, a feeling, a stillness, a rhythm pressed deep into the soil beneath me. I remember his sadness. I remember his softness. I remember the way he loved without claiming. And I gathered it all, like dew gathers on leaves in the early light. I didn't understand then that I would become something more than bark and branches, that one day others would come, not looking for him, but finding him anyway. Through me. The first was a fox. Long after the elephant was gone, she came on a night full of thunder, soaked and shaken. She didn't say a word, but I felt her heart beating against my roots like a wild drum, so I gave her a memory. The elephant standing still in the rain, not flinching, letting it wash over him as if storms could be prayers. She left calmer, and then more came. One by one. They didn't know they were looking for him, but somehow, in their deepest ache, their tired bones, their questions they couldn't name, they found me, and I shared what he left behind, not as a lesson, as a presence, because that is all he ever truly gave, and that is all they truly needed. Last night, the little squirrel came back. Maple. She pressed her paw to my trunk and whispered, "I think I understand now." He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted us to feel, free. She was right. Freedom wasn't something he gave by force. He offered it through gentleness. A gentleness that said, you don't have to know. You don't have to hurry. You don't have to become anything more than what you already are. And now I wait, not for crowds, not for endings. I wait the way roots do. With patience, with silence, with the knowing that even the quietest presence leaves an echo that never leaves. So if you come to me one day, not sure why, only knowing that you are tired, sit beneath my shade. You won't hear his voice, but you might feel a warmth rising from the ground, soft and wide, like the back of an elephant in twilight, still carrying the world, but never letting it grow heavy. The forest was wide, wider than Maple remembered. The trees seemed taller, the paths longer, the wind a little louder. She had left the echo tree at dawn, unsure of what she was doing, only that she had to do it. There was no voice in her head, no command from the roots, only a gentle rhythm inside her chest, slow and certain. It wasn't courage that moved her, it was belonging. And belonging, she had learned, does not make you fearless. It makes you gentle with your fear. As she walked, she passed other creatures. Some nodded. Some didn't see her at all. One growled. She smiled anyway, not because she was strong, but because she wasn't pretending anymore. At the edge of a rocky hill, she met a young porcupine named Darrow, trembling behind a bush. He'd climbed too high and now couldn't find his way back down. "Don't look at me," he snapped when she approached. "I'm not afraid. I just need to think." Maple didn't argue. She sat beside him, quiet, still. She said nothing for a long time, until he finally whispered, "Aren't you going to tell me I'm being silly?" Maple shook her head slowly. "No, but I can tell you a story." Darrow narrowed his eyes. "Is it about how brave you are?" Maple chuckled softly. "No. It's about an elephant who once stood in the rain and let it wash through him, just because he didn't need to fight the storm." Darrow blinked, and after a pause, he asked, "Did he climb hills?" Maple nodded. "Sometimes, but only when they called him gently." They sat there until dusk, and when the stars began to show, Darrow stood, I think the hill is calling me, but not all at once. Just one paw at a time. Maple smiled. Mappo tucked herself into a patch of moss and stared at the stars. And down they went, slowly, together. That night, by a crooked root under an old oak. She didn't feel brave, but she felt real, and that was enough. Above her, the wind moved through the leaves like an unseen lullaby, and if you listened closely, you might hear what it carried. The gentle ones never vanish. They just walk ahead and leave peace blooming in their footsteps. Asterisk somewhere, deep in the forest, the echo tree stirs. A root shifts, a leaf falls, and the memory of an elephant smiles softly. Not because he is remembered, but because his gentleness has taken root in one more beating heart. Asterisk. Nilo had never known silence until Maple came. Not real silence. Not the kind that doesn't feel empty, but full. Like still water holding the moon. He used to sleep with a ticking leaf clock under his pillow. It made him feel safe. Like time was always moving for him, even when he couldn't. But now, after Maple's visit, the ticking sounded loud. Too loud. So that night, he tucked the clock into a drawer. And when he lay down to sleep, he didn't count the minutes. He listened, and the silence answered. Not with words, with peace. The next morning, he woke up before the bell tower rang. Not because he had to, but because something inside him felt wide and open, like a path with no fences. He wandered past the usual lines of animals, checking their schedules, past the weasel with the charts, past the badger polishing his time horn, and he walked to the edge of the village, where the grass grew wild, where the wind didn't care what hour it was, where nothing was measured but the light between the leaves. He had never stepped there before. Too unplanned, others had said, but today Nilo stepped out, and the moment he did, he felt a hush, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. It just holds you. As he wandered through tall ferns and soft moss, a memory brushed his mind. Maple, sitting still beneath the broken tower, breathing like the world wasn't rushing. He mimicked her breath, slow, soft, steady, and that's when he noticed something shimmering between the branches, something golden, barely there. He reached up and caught a feather, thin, light, glowing faintly at the edges. It felt warm in his paw. Not magic, not loud, just true. Attached to the stem was a note written in bark-scratched letters. For when the world forgets again, listen first, then breathe. Nilo sat on a fallen log. He didn't run back. He didn't report it. Didn't tell himself what it meant. He just let it be. And in that moment, with the feather in his lap and the wind nudging his fur, he understood. Stillness. It's not what happens when all noise stops. Stillness is what grows when we stop running from it. He returned to the village as the sun dipped low. No one noticed he had left, but something had shifted. He walked slower, smiled more, ticked less, and sometimes, late at night, others would find him sitting by the broken clock tower, holding the golden feather, humming nothing in particular. And that humming was more comforting than the ticking had ever been. Asterisk, far away, where the wind tucks memories into hollow trunks, the echo tree rustles with a quiet pride. Another heart has remembered the weight of gentleness. Another footstep has slowed, and somewhere, without fanfare, the elephant spirit walks softly again. Asterisk, Orin had always been proud of his wisdom. He kept scrolls tucked between roots, mapped the stars with charcoal and bark, told stories about logic and survival and the cleverness of claws and wings. He wasn't unkind, just certain, and certainty can be a cage, even when you build it from books. He had met Bonto once, long ago. The elephant had come to sit beneath orange tree, silent as dusk. Orin, perched above, had watched with narrowed eyes. You'll get nothing done just sitting there, he hooted. Bonto had only smiled. Not in defiance, not in mockery, but in a way that made Orin uncomfortable. Gentleness isn't a strategy, Orin had said. It's a risk. But Bonto had not replied, and that silence haunted Orin more than any argument could. Now, years later, the owl was old. His feathers were graying, his scrolls were dusty, and his thoughts had grown soft around the edges. Ever since the clocks had stopped ticking in Toktok Hollow, Orin had begun to feel a restlessness in his wings. He'd heard of a young squirrel, Maple, who had moved through the village like a breeze, and a raccoon named Nilo, who now hummed instead of rushing. He'd heard whispers of a golden feather off the echo tree, and he remembered Bonto's eyes how. They didn't argue, they simply saw it. One night, the wind stirred his dreams. He awoke before dawn, stepped out onto the lowest branch, and let the breeze lift through his feathers. Something within him whispered, not because he would find answers, but because he might finally listen to the question. Orin flew for 3 days. Not far for younger owls, but far for one carrying the weight of long-held pride. He landed at the clearing where the echo tree grew, its trunk thick with time, its branches humming with presence. He sat on a root, waited. Nothing happened, but then he saw it. A golden feather caught on a low branch, swaying gently. He reached out, carefully, and when he touched it, a memory surged. Bonto standing in the moonlight, his eyes reflecting stars, his silence, not emptiness, but invitation. Orin bowed his head. For the first time in decades, he wept. Not from sadness, but from the breaking of something brittle inside him. He stayed under the tree all night, and just before morning, he whispered to the wind. I thought wisdom was in the answers, but maybe it's in the softness of the question. When he returned to his forest, he didn't carry scrolls. He carried seeds and planted them wherever not because they would feed him, but because he finally understood. The most powerful things we leave behind are often the ones we'll never see bloom. Asterisk, and somewhere in the soil, beneath leaf and root and lightless dark, the elephant's memory reaches out once more, not to be known, but to be felt. Asterisk.